There's a few kinds of stories that we see in movies and TV that I think will never get old. The public will never be sick of watching them, and filmmakers will never stop making them. A love story, a coming-of-age story, the story where the good guys defeat the evil forces. But the story I want to talk about today is the underdog story, particularly through the lens of the American dream. It could be rags to riches, or it could be pretty much any sports movie where the guy who becomes the star athlete is the guy you'd never expect. Americans love to see average Joe become really successful. And of course we love it because we all want to have the opportunity for that to happen in our own lives. In George Carlin's comedy special, Life is Worth Losing, he says that it's called the American dream because you'd have to be asleep to believe it. And that quote has really stuck with me, and I've seen it floating around online. It seems like over the past 20 to 30 years, Americans have become more and more disillusioned with the idea of the American dream. And it's not necessarily that younger generations don't dream of it anymore, but it really is more like a movie plot than an actual realistic, achievable goal. It's the kind of dream that you have like when you were 6 and you wanted to be a ballerina, a dream based in lack of understanding and context. And it's not just pessimism either. The data is there to back up the fact that Gen Z and millennials have a less upward mobility than their parents by a number of measures. The success of Americans has flattened or fallen off since the 80s. But just to step back for a second, what is the American dream anyway? It's not like there's a set in stone definition, but I think it is all about 5 key characteristics: freedom, equality, opportunity, success, and I've saved the most important one for last, which is meritocracy. If you believe in the American dream, then everyone in this country has the freedom and equal opportunity to achieve a comfortable, financially stable, happy life. And the only requirements to get there are willpower, hard work, and a certain level of talent. Although I think some people could make the argument that talent is mostly a product of willpower and hard work. Meritocracy has always kind of seemed like a karmic belief system to me. Based on this ideology, the people who are at the bottom of society are the ones who are the least skilled and least intelligent. So they are the most deserving of that low position. They belong there. And those who have risen to the top are there because they are the smartest or the most athletic or put in the most hours, or maybe all 3. When it comes to movies and TV, I'm not saying I don't ever want to watch an underdog story of someone achieving their dreams. But maybe I'm just getting a little tired of films using their stories to support the idea that a fair system of meritocracy is both possible and working well in this country, because neither of those things are true. Messaging in entertainment often makes its way into the culture and shapes people's beliefs. I talked in a previous video about some movies and shows that critique capitalism and how I'm a big fan of a lot of those, and I hope that they encourage people to think more critically about capitalism and class inequality. Those ideas have been kind of on a protected pedestal in mass media for a long time. I'd like to see meritocracy up next as a theme on the chopping block, because right now, in the world of movies, there are tons of examples of a very glamorized path of hard work that ultimately leads to massive success. A perfect case of this is Jordan Belfort in The Wolf of Wall Street. He starts off as this bright-eyed member of the working middle class with an American dream of making it big and becoming rich, and he's ready to put in the work to get there. There's a scene in this movie that is kind of the kickstart of the road to success montage, and It's Jordan at this rinky-dink brokerage firm, bottom of the barrel, and he cold calls a customer to try and sell them a very average investment. He's a great talker, and this scene makes it click for us as the audience. Oh, this guy is a master salesman, and everyone around him is impressed by his talent. It makes his huge success feel inevitable. Of course, this guy's meant to make it big. Look at what he can do. He's the best. It makes his riches and status, at the very least, justified. He's meant to be on a yacht with millions and Margot Robbie. Is this meritocracy in action or destiny? Are they the same thing? Something that Wolf of Wall Street does not do is give any glimpse into the difficulty of working your way to the top. And I understand this is a movie, we don't have unlimited time, but it makes it look like it's a joyride to the top, and then once you get there, it's one big party. Realistically, even in the 90s, he would have been having to put in serious hours and dedication to build up his own firm. Just because Jordan Belfort is talented does not exempt him from needing to work really hard. Getting rich and staying there is nowhere near as fun and easy as this movie makes it look. Okay, well, my cat's here now, so hopefully you don't mind. But aside from the unrealistic angle and unbelievable romanticizing of rich people's lives, this movie had the perfect opportunity to point out a problem with meritocracy, and I really wish they would have taken it. And the problem is this. Meritocracy factors in effort and ability when determining who advances to the top. But whether or not you're a good person, that is completely left out of the equation. And personally, when I think we're talking about a system to organize society by, I would like ethics to be accounted for when we're allocating power and money. The pigs were the smartest animals in Orwell's Animal Farm, but they used that to exploit all the other less intelligent creatures. So skill does not necessarily mean you should be in charge. Should you win at the American dream if you're an underdog, but you're an asshole? Jordan Belfort is pretty objectively a bad person, and it's not even like the movie tries to hide that, but his character is positioned in a way where we're not meant to root against him because he's smart and he's talented and good looking and he throws an awesome party that we would all like to be invited to. He achieved his dream of riches and status, and nothing about this movie challenges whether or not he deserved that success. When it comes to portraying the other end of the financial spectrum, I often feel like movies where poverty or living below middle class is a theme are afraid to show characters who do not, at least to some extent, move up the financial ladder by the end of the movie. And I understand that you want to show change, but there are ways to do that, different ways, non-financial ways, to still point out the fact that many people are never going to reach their American dream of financial comfort. I really love the way that this is depicted in The Florida Project, which was made in 2017, and I think it's a very interesting slice of lifestyle movie that shows what it's really like struggling to get by in America. And spoiler alert, does not turn out for better in the end. The single mother, Haley, ends up facing the legal consequences of her actions of turning to illegal means of making money, and her daughter Mooney gets put into the foster care system. It is heartbreaking, but the whole film just feels so brutally real, like a peek behind the curtain of America. No one wants their lives to end up like these characters. We all want to have our blinders on. And while I love this movie for showing something so raw, I could see how some people could watch it and think, this is meritocracy working as it should, sorting people where they belong. Haley is not a particularly hard worker. She's not that good at anything. And she's not even like nice. It's really hard to sympathize with her because she's just kind of all around unlikable. So some people might think she deserves to be living this shitty standard of life. And Mooney also is a little brat, spitting on like her neighbors' cars and breaking into different rooms in the motel, teaching other kids how to beg for money and ice cream. But at the end, where her mom gets taken away and we see where this is headed, you don't think, oh, Mooney deserves this. She's only a brat because Haley's her mom and this is the environment that she's grown up in. And none of that is her fault. But when you think about it that way, how do we know Haley wasn't born into the exact same cycle? On a totally different example, there's another movie about living in poverty that takes the more classic American dream storyline, where the main character makes it out of his tough circumstances and rises to the top through his hard work and talent. And this is the story of Hillbilly Elegy, aka J.D. Vance's story, based on the book he wrote about his life. No wonder conservatives are more likely to believe in the American dream. I'm sure he sees himself as living proof that anyone can pull up their bootstraps and make it. But the sad part about this story is actually JD's mom, Beverly. It's mentioned a few times throughout the movie how smart she is, how she was second in her class. So why didn't she deserve to achieve the American dream? Unfortunately, the movie makes it seem like Beverly being poor is due to her own character faults. She's not mentally strong enough to overcome her biggest weakness, which is addiction. She won't take personal responsibility for the bad choices that she's made that hurt herself and others. She says that maybe if her parents had put in more of an effort to nurture her once she was showing academic promise, that she could have been something different, someone better, but that's putting the blame on someone else. Something that really annoys me about Hillbilly Elegy is knowing that J.D. Vance supports this idea that if you work really hard, you can succeed in this country. And yet, he acknowledges in the movie when he's at these fancy meetings and dinners in law school that he's the odd one out. There is no one else around who has grown up anywhere near poverty except himself. Was J.D. the only smart, hardworking kid in Appalachia? Or is the truth closer to the fact that effort and brains don't mean you'll get a spot at the table? Most of those who make it in America have the talent, they put in the hours, and a third special factor: predisposed for success based on the circumstances they're born into. I think there's a few stories out there in film, although they're in the minority, that showcase people who don't get what they deserve. And maybe filmmakers are afraid to do more. They might think, well, if we show someone who works really hard for years and never achieves their dreams, then that's the absence of a story. But I don't think that that's true. The film The Founder tells the story based on real life of how McDonald's became a fast food empire. And it's mostly through the perspective of Ray Kroc in a classic American dream. Regular guy has a lot of persistence, which ends up paying off, and he gets very rich. But I think it could have been equally interesting, if not more so, if the McDonald's brothers were the main characters. It was their restaurant after all, and they are in the movie, but secondary to Ray Kroc. There's a deeply interesting plot there about the brains behind great operations and achieving great success, but then having it yanked away from you by a greedy slime ball and ending up with nothing. I wanted The Founder to be their story. The lack of karma at work would be put on display, but certainly would not lack in entertainment. I love when a movie has the courage to point out privileges and disadvantages through characters in ways that a lot of people have never even heard of. One movie that does a great job at this is Emily the Criminal, which shows how impossible it is to move up the ladder in America once you have a record. Emily is skilled and dedicated, but over the years of working low-level jobs has reduced her dreams. She knows that her design talent is not a path to success in America, partly because of how this country values art, but mostly because she knows she will be locked out of even medium-level jobs forever because of her previous convictions. It's suggested in the movie that the charges might not have even been her fault. She was just maybe fighting back against an abusive ex. Certainly no reason to be considered a bad person or to be barred forever from financial success, but that is the harsh truth in this country. The only people who are in a position to take an unpaid internship to kick off a higher level career are the ones who are already financially stable. Karma never swoops in to turn Emily's life around for the better. Something I've noticed about a lot of these American Dream movies is that they're based on true stories, which is interesting, and I think gives audiences a skewed idea that these success stories are a dime a dozen, and that means that yours is just around the corner as long as you keep working at it. When the real stories that are a dime a dozen are more like what's shown in Nomadland. One of the reasons I think that movie is so unique and brave is that it is based on a real place where a sheetrock plant closed down, laid off everyone, and within a few years, the zip code was discontinued. It became a real-life ghost town. But another reason Nomadland is special is because it doesn't just show one man or one woman's story. Fern is the main character, but it's more about this bigger, mostly hidden wave of older Americans who have experienced financial downturn later in life and are now struggling to get by and turning to more unconventional ways of living to save money. Kudos to Chloe Zhao for spotlighting how dependent we are on our employers and how financial security is never guaranteed in America. Even if you were previously comfortable, it can always be taken away. Some people might think that the idea of meritocracy keeps being pushed and included in that American dream idea because powerful people keep using it as a justification as to why the system should not be questioned by the masses. It's an easily understood explanation as to their riches being well earned. But meritocracy is not working for the rich either. And before you think I'm crazy, my point is it's past due for us to start criticizing these ideas on a larger scale because they aren't working for anyone, regardless of where you are on the ladder of success in the US. Back in the day, a lot of rich people were aristocrats, and they had their wealth through lineage, and they did not have jobs. They didn't work. None of them would try and say that their money was based on their merit, because even the village idiot would know that that's a lie. But nowadays, it's not like that anymore. There are still some aristocrats in America who don't work, but the reality is the wealthiest in this country now, for the most part, are working a shit ton. Mark Zuckerberg is at least somewhat socially inept and contributing harm to society, but you cannot call him lazy or stupid. In the social network, based on the building of Facebook, you can clearly see Zuckerberg's high level of education and clear programming talent on display. There's multiple times where he's shown in this locked-in state, just completely focused on working at the computer for hours on end. Something I really like about this movie is that it shows how riches and success are not all it's cracked up to be. Mark Zuckerberg, from the beginning of the grind to the end at the top, doesn't seem happy. The reality is, in America today, the gap between the poor and the middle class is much smaller between gaps at the top, like between the top 10% and the top 1%, or an even greater gap between the top 1% and the top 0.1% or the 0.01%. To keep climbing upward once you're generally rich requires an immense amount of labor and skill. You basically have to turn yourself into a robot. And that's what Zuckerberg and a lot of other wealthy people have done. There is so much competition up at the top between rich and wealthy people. It's no wonder that students at these Ivy League universities report scary high levels of pressure and burnout. We also see this shown in The Devil Wears Prada, where Miranda Priestly, as the top woman in charge, always working, always on, never takes a break, shows this brief moment of vulnerability where she's still working in the midst of a divorce. And it's clear, without really saying it, it shows it in a great way. She's exploited herself to the point of exhaustion, but she knows that she can't let up even for a second, because if she does, there is someone right behind her waiting to swoop in and take that higher spot. If we're saying that those who achieve the American dream based on their effort and ability, the standards of those are just going to keep increasing. Now the businessman with a master's degree will achieve over the one who has a bachelor's. The lawyer who puts in 80 hours a week will achieve success over the one who puts in 60 or 70. Even the person who goes to a better kindergarten will reach success, a higher level of success in life, over the person who went to an average kindergarten. When does it end? There's only so many hours that you can work in the week. Once we've squeezed out every drop of labor and maximized our education to level up our skills to 1,000, then what? Honestly, I think the rich people in this country would probably rather go back to the non-meritocratic days where they didn't have to prove themselves and work themselves to the bone just to hold on to their spot in society. If you want to do a little reading instead of watching about these ideas, I highly recommend the book The Meritocracy Trap by Daniel Markovits. Not the easiest read, but really interesting and a big inspiration behind this video, honestly. I touched on this a little bit earlier, but part of the issue I have of the major over-representation of succeeding at the American dream on screen is that I think it may lead to a lot of regular people drawing conclusions based on an unrealistic pool of data. Even though it's just a movie, it still has an impact. Kind of like how the girlies who grew up in the 90s grew up with a pretty poor idea that there's a handsome prince out there just waiting to swoop you off your feet, assuming you're skinny and don't have too many opinions. And this is a problem not just with movies and TV, but also with social media. If most of what you're seeing is successful people, then it might be easy to think that having a nice house and a nice car and financially supporting having multiple children and having no debt and a healthy shopping and entertainment budget is all very achievable, and you are just a temporarily embarrassed future millionaire. If J.D. Vance and Mark Zuckerberg and Eminem and Rudy Rudiger all did it, then I'm sure my time will come. And if it doesn't, then it wasn't supposed to come because I'm not skilled enough to deserve it. The biggest problem that I have with that is not that people are in for a big disappointment and a life of struggle and acting in accordance of what they think their future interest will be rather than ever giving themselves a chance to get there. The bigger issue is that these stories reinforce the idea that a fair, functioning, meritocratic society is even possible. Life is not a race where everyone is born at the same time at the same starting line in the absence of any external factors or even good and bad luck. That could be a meritocracy. Just for one lap, whoever is the best at running will win the race. But life is iterative. We're all born at different times into a race that has already started, and we're all at different starting lines in different better or worse circumstances. And in that scenario, a truly fair meritocracy cannot happen. Whether or not you achieve the American dream cannot solely be based on skill, because skill is never the only factor at play. If two people are both interested in running and they both get into it at the same time, but one of them's dad has a background in running or training athletes professionally, or one of the people has a different physical advantage or disadvantage, or one of the people is 6 months older than the other, that success is going to be based off not just their inherent talent, but the other factors that could not be controlled as well. The cutthroat nature of competition for success in America, in my opinion, is going too far. Just one tiny little mistake, whether you put in the most effort, whether you were truly the most talented, one little mistake and you're done. Sometimes the good guys lose and the bad guys win. But maybe it's not that the movie industry is afraid to show that uncomfortable truth, but that they think entertainment isn't the right channel for the message. Movies are about escapism, right? Who wants to face reality when you could zone into a screen and imagine your life as a future winner of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? Or even on a smaller scale of getting into your dream college and getting to leave your mediocre life behind and move to the big city. But the avenue of digital media, whether fictional or not, based on a true story or not, is such a great way to reach the minds of the masses. So I say, why not take advantage of the opportunity? I say you can have both sides, and both stories are worth telling. The one where the American dream is achieved is not inherently better or more worth telling than the one where it's not achieved. It's about more of a balance to still have amazing entertainment and not create as much of a deeply distorted reality. Some days you watch Wolf of Wall Street or The Founder, other days you watch The Florida Project or Emily the Criminal. There is a really difficult message I have to take away from all of this, because as much as I've said that we can't have this perfect meritocratic dream where those who are the most able achieve the most success, and sometimes people don't get what they deserve, no matter how hard they try, we can't just stop trying. Even if you have this realization that your talents and efforts aren't enough to get you as high as you'd like to be on the ladder towards the American dream, doesn't mean that you should throw those efforts and talents in the trash to be wasted. There has to be some level of hope or incentive that we hold on to in our minds, even if it's unrealistic, in order to not slip into apathy, because that doesn't help ourselves or others either. If we want to have any hope of creating change and spreading ideas to make things better, we have to hold on to two concepts at the same time. Number one, a fully functioning meritocracy is a myth, and pretending that we have one and it's working in this country is not helping, and it's not working for a majority of Americans, even the rich ones. And number two, there is still great value in hard work and improving your abilities and trying to get smart, talented people into positions of power through organizing and talking about these kinds of things in your community. I know it can be really tempting to fall into just that first concept, and a lot of young Americans have fallen into that, and I sometimes do too. Like, you just want to say, I'm never going to be enough to really make it, so fuck it, I'm just going to rot in bed. There's other versions of success besides the traditional American dream. And I do think that it's been adapting and changing. But I don't want us to diminish it too much for ourselves, because everybody, regardless of their effort and abilities, I truly mean everybody, deserves at least some base level of achievement and happiness in their life. Now's as good a time as any to incorporate this messaging into movies and TV to try and crack through the screen and get people thinking and talking in an age where critical thinking is discouraged at every turn about what we want our futures to be like, even if it's not going to look like a movie. If you enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a thumbs up or subscribing, and thank you for watching.